Drew, thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back to Wreck and Rule.
Hey everybody.
For the people who don't know, your official title is?
Global Brand Manager. So I run the Transformers trading card game. Game designers like Matt Smith and Scott Van Essen, who you were talking to yesterday,
yes,
they report up to somebody else. So I handle marketing, and I handle creative, and I handle the packaging and product design. And there's an awesome team that backs me. I don't do all this stuff myself.
Right. First, I want to say thank you in person. We thank you guys on video all the time for sending us preview cards and advanced product.
Absolutely.
And it's awesome to do that for the fans.
Absolutely.
We love it. So we're coming up on a year into the game.
Literally, because we debuted our first
GenCon,
retail product was for sale here at GenCon.
Right. What has surprised you the most about this game?
There's a lot of things. I think the thing that's most surprising is the insane pickup from the Transformers community. And insane in terms of insanely good. So, like, we really hit the nerve right, you know? It feels Transformers to folks who have been doing Transformers as their lifestyle hobby for 35 years. And that was our intent. But it feels like we massively exceeded expectations. And things like Siege, where we redesign characters from way back in the day and bring them into the modern generation's look and feel, has gone over so well. It's been really gratifying to hear that feedback. And you know, players are like, "Oh wow, man, I would love to see a toy like this." Right. Is amazing.
Are there currently any regrets about any specific character card or battle card that you may be looking into?
So. Regrets is not the right way to put it. Like our design philosophy is you have to push the envelope, and it is correct to just kiss on the other side of that line. Like, don't go too far, because if you're too safe, the game is not interesting. Right. Like if designs are very safe, if they're very obvious, if things sort of are just math, right? Like. That is not exciting. It doesn't get fans interested in deck building. It doesn't get fans interested in trying weird strategies, which is, you know, for a lot of fans, is part of the fun. So I will say, you know, we had to ban a card, and as much as we never want to ban a card, if we hadn't pushed the envelope to that point, we would have been. You and I would not be talking a year in. So I think that frames this. There are a couple of card things that I think that we could have done a little bit differently in retrospect. I think there are a little bit too many vanilla creatures in...
What kind of creatures?
Vanilla. So vanilla creatures is sort of Wizards' internal speak for cards that... I'm saying creatures. It's been a long weekend. Characters that have no text abilities on them.
On both sides.
Right, so they're blank on both sides. And I think we overdid that a little bit, especially in the commons in Wave 1. And you know, when we got to Wave 2, there are characters like Nova Star, and they are very clearly making up for the fact that they don't have text abilities by just raw stats. And that's cool. There's always going to be a space for some of those characters in small numbers, but I don't think I think we've learned and changed our philosophy about just textless characters in general.
We just tried to look that up, and Wave 3 we noticed there's only like 2 or 3 characters with only one blank side.
Exactly.
Are you guys veering away from that totally, or were you...
No. One blank side is our new philosophy for characters that would have had 2 blank sides in the past. Right? Like, and the reason we want to have some of those characters, especially at common, is because if people get into the game, we don't want them to have to decipher tons of information at once. We want there to be some things that you can just look at and understand. Right. And so character cards that have like one keyword ability, particularly if it's one of the more basic keyword abilities like bold or tough, those always have a place in the game.
Oh yeah.
Because there's always going to be players who are coming in with whatever the new set is.
And they don't need to be like hit with all this information once, just slow and steady.
Correct.
Has the community discovered something that you guys thought would have been obvious?
Not discovered?
Not discovered, right.
Metroplex early on, we thought it was more obvious how competitive Metroplex was, because like there were Metroplex decks here, right? Like, and it's not a top tier deck, but it's a viable deck. Like if you're at a qualifying event, and it took a very long time for players to see that. And I think Joe at PAX Unplugged last year with like 4-1 in one of the events. Joe,
Yeah.
and that was an eye opener for a lot of players, and you really, I know. For everybody who's listening, John needs to meet the judge in the play area. When you did that and posted that record with that, like I remember distinctly in the fan groups, people were like incredulous, and some people were just talking about how you could have piloted any deck to that record, and that's not true. Like the cards have to be there, the synergy has to be there, and that's something that we sort of changed how we talked about it. Like when Trypticon was announced, like when all the Trypticon cards were out, there were some people who were like, oh wow, I see what's going on here, and there were a lot of people who were like, this is a terrible card.
Right.
And like it's a different design paradigm, and we need to be a little bit clearer about that design paradigm and how we're doing what we're doing when we announce certain things. Like Trypticon, for example, doesn't need to spend flips on the Titan to deploy his characters.
Right.
And doesn't really need to have action cards in the deck that provide additional flips.
Right.
So people were like, I'm wasting action slots to deploy characters. And the intent was, no, you're getting to build your deck entirely differently, and you don't have to care about those extra flips.
Right.
And now you can use those slots for something else. So yes, you're going to spend an action to deploy a character, but you know what? You have freed up n number of slots in your deck to do something else, and Trypticon can just stay in robot mode and just slap things around.
Right, I hope to avoid that stigma when you guys released Metroplex. I'm pretty sure everyone was like, this is just a gimmick, this might not work. And like, when I tried it and when I did well at PAX, and then people started to catch on, it was like, I think Wizards know what they're doing. I think they've tested this, and this actually probably works, so why don't we just take it easy about the sky is falling and just let it play out.
Yep.
And I think they've done this correctly.
Right, our starter decks are low power level compared
sure.
to, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
But the ones that don't say starter deck on them, they are, to some degree or another, buildable into an interesting and, decent deck.
Absolutely.
I don't think people have found the best build for Devastator, and there's some cards in Wave 4.
Is it blue or orange?
I think it's blue-black.
I'm close. Close.
I think that you need to use black pips in order to push through damage when they're in bot mode, because they're so small, and they're like 4-star characters just can't have a lot of stats, right? So I think you need the black pips in order to consistently push through enough damage that once you are able to convert, you're not looking at an enemy board that has max health across the board. That said, I think there are a few cards in Siege 2 that will help with that. There are clearly more black pip cards in Siege 2, and more of them that provide different options that I think the Devastator deck will enjoy.
I'm assuming you guys are going to be a little cautious about printing more blue-black cards, or maybe some star ones with that. Don't want that to get out of hand.
So we're going to be very cautious about printing multi-pip cards that don't cost a star. Like, costing a star is a big enough sacrifice that you're making when building, that we have a little bit more flexibility there. Like, and you saw on the Trypticon card that
It's very specific.
that redeploys his characters. Like that ability is very limited in its use. It's powerful when you can use it, but you have to have the setup there. So that card was able to have 3 different color pips on it, and that's we think a reasonable. One place that we're probably not going to go anytime soon is more double blue or double orange cards that don't cost a star.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that.
Right,
yeah.
right, because there's a saturation point. Like, imagine we just added 1 new double orange card.
Please don't.
We're not. We're absolutely not. But imagine that case. Like, Insecticon decks in particular would just be, like, over-the-line powerful. There are other decks that would benefit it, but decks that only care, like Firecons would probably be too... maybe.
They'd be helped.
They'd be helped. Like, and if there was another double blue pit, there's a whole swath of decks that would benefit in a way that's not really healthy.
A lot of games would go to time. Probably.
Yes, and that's particularly, like, we want this game to be aggressive. Like, we want a winner to be determined. And we want that to happen in a time period, in a competitive setting that is reasonable so the event can move on.
Correct.
Right? Like a 7-round event, we don't want to last 12 hours.
Right. Regarding organized play, what led to the decisions to add sideboards?
Organized play is so people can demonstrate their skill, and sideboards add an enormous skill layer in there. And while there's plenty of skill in playing the game and plenty of skill, particularly in deck building, sideboards give players a way to add that layer in, and then on top of that, it solves the issue of
My deck auto loses against that particular deck, and I can't do anything.
That's correct. If you don't have sideboards, we were very concerned about a tendency to for players to build decks that were low risk, low reward, that tried to be general purpose decks, as opposed to decks that wants to do a thing, right? And that's a lot of fun, and that has a lot of reward. And sideboards allow that to enough flexibility. I think Matt's talked about this before. In the level of transformation we wanted to enable via sideboard, and that's why we have the limits on number of cards and number of stars, because while we want a deck to be able to do something different and take a different approach, and I think a classic example here is boarding into twin primes, we don't want players to be able to have basically two decks and just hot swapping in and out.
That was going to be my next question. Do you guys worry about the ability to completely rapidly change a deck? Like, I'm playing this, and all of a sudden I'm playing something different. Your opponent's like, or is that part of the player's skill? Like, surprise, I can do this.
It's some of the skill and some of the surprise, but there's a limit to that. That's why, for example, we have a number of cards that have to be in the sideboard after sideboarding is complete. So that, and before sideboarding, and why we're very specific about that, because we don't want, we knew that people, if there was no rules like that, would try things like just have their first round deck be, I'm a little hyperbole here, but all the cards, and then sideboard out everything that wasn't applicable to this match. Right, and that's just not the spirit of this game.
Regarding that, also, why choose a character also, as opposed to just the 10 battle cards?
That was something that we talked about a lot, and one of it is those reasons is because we do make characters that are designed to deal with different situations. Acid Storm, Motor Master, these characters have abilities that help you deal with situations. And if we put all of that in the battle deck, then finding those solutions there's too high variance, right? The game is balanced so that some abilities are on characters and start in play, so you have them from the beginning of the game. And we would have to completely change the paradigm of character design if we were going to have no characters in the sideboard. And we knew that the sideboard was going to exist from the very beginning, right? We knew that there was going to be
no question
organized play. Yes, it was inevitable because we knew there was organized play, and the needs of organized play talk about a sideboard. And you can see that Acid Storm was probably a signal to some people that there was going to be sideboarding when we went to competitive play, because Acid Storm is a very specifically a silver bullet card.
Right.
And that came out in set 2 before we'd announced organized play.
And why the current star cost? Why was that choice made? Was it 19?
Actually, at some point when there was no star cost, but it was just one character, someone boarded it in playtest, boarded it in Metroplex, and we're like, hold on a second.
Well, that's a very specific deck you need to build.
It is, and so. You could do theoretically. You could do something like Blue Streak Red Alert or whatever that values multicolored pips, and then board into Metroplex.
Clever.
And that was over the line for us. But what we did want to enable is Guardian class characters, like Omega Supreme.
Oh, Guardian class.
So Titan class characters are going to be in the 23, 24, 25 point range. And you see this. Inevitably there will be more Titans, right? There's no specific plans for Titan stuff that I can talk about, but they're going to be in there because there's a lot of them, and we all love Titans.
I was wondering why you chose the 19, started 19, not just to see how the people would react for the first year. Started 10, and that wasn't enough. Go to 11 or 12.
Right. And then since we know that, there aren't that many Guardians class characters in Transformers IP. Omega Supreme is literally the last Guardian, so I'm kind of shorthanding here. But that level of that size and class of character is probably going to be in the 1920 range, or the 18, 19, 20 range, and that's why we picked that number, so that you could choose to put in one of those characters, but not a Titan. And that allows us to have Titans have very specific deck design that doesn't care about normal deck design. It does something very, very unique and different. And we want you to, if you want to play that in a competitive event, commit to that.
I'd like to see Omega Supreme win something.
Say again?
I'd like to see Omega Supreme win something.
I mean, Omega Supreme's is intentionally right, and it's intentionally on the little bit lower end of power level for a character that stars, because of the way that, like, it was a promo through Loot Crate, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so we wanted to make sure that, you know, some people weren't going to have easy access to that, or chose not to sign up for Loot Crate, and we didn't want to have that character be, you know, we learned from San Diego Comic-Con 18, and we didn't want to have that character be more difficult to get and feel like you were compelled to get it.
Because it's too overpowered.
Right, exactly. So it's a cool promo character. There will be other things in that range in the future, you know, like maybe in 2020. But unless it's super widely available, then we're going to make sure that it's not.
Why was there no decision to make a mulligan rule?
Because the deck provides the necessary variance in the game. So some people look at Transformers and think about the flips and think that this is a super high variance game, and it's actually not. Because the character cards starting in play drastically reduce the overall variance of the game, right? It's not like many other trading card games where you have to draw critical characters.
Right.
Like, there are worlds, let's say you're playing Magic the Gathering, and you need to draw specific cards, and you'll play cards that help you acquire those, get those cards in the game, and that reduces variance, but you're paying a price for it. Whereas in Transformers, the only real variance engine is the deck, and a mulligan so significantly reduces overall variance that that was unhealthy. Now, I mean, we did test that very early on.
I would assume so, yeah. You don't want people to start off with 3-start your engines and it's like, oh.
Literally this, right? Or have such a high percentage chance to get a 2-card combo, and that enables us to have cards. Like, think about the secret action Bolster. Bolster is a high risk, high reward card, and
paid off to somebody.
And paid off yesterday in that deck, right? Like, the risk there is you have to have both Bolster and also an armor that is correct for using Bolster, right? And so that 2-card combo, if you could mulligan as an example, we would not be able to split up power across 2-card combos like that and have that chance of draw be a mitigating factor against overpowered combos. So
my next question was, going into the top 32 of GenCon in a few hours, but that's not few hours. It would be past. The question was, what does your group expect to see or hope to see? But so start that question.
I can answer that question. I'll just flip around. So we thought that there was a lot of diversity in the top 32 decks.
Oh my god, yeah.
And that we were very pleased with that, because we want to see diversity, right? Like, we know that eventually metagames will collapse down to a clear tier of top decks.
Right.
But there was a lot of people trying a lot of different things, and GenCon helps establish this meta. For all the people who are doing qualifying events in stores, there's now a lot of choices. Like, I would say the decks that made the top 8 are all viable options. And the thing I was happiest about were that there were a number of players who took a hard look at the Blaster deck. Yep. And decided that there was something, or realized that there was something there, not the Blaster deck exactly as presented, but a Blaster core package plus, say, a Battle Master is super, super powerful, competitive, and we knew that.
You guys knew that?
Absolutely. Matt Smith designed that. Soundwave is a little bit more difficult to pull off at a very high level of competitive play. They play well against each other, but we think that there's some untapped Soundwave potential there that people will discover over time. But Blaster was very intentionally obvious in our minds. Like,
wow.
Because
apparently only like 1 or 2 people caught on to that.
and this is something that we're going to work on when we're talking about. But the fact that Blaster pops out a bot who can attack means that Blaster defends himself, right? Like, and he can constantly spit out, or for a couple of turns, spit out someone, so you can keep Blaster relatively undamaged. And that is a really, really powerful ability. In the same way that the aerial bots have attack control and damage control, Blaster has that as well. And being able to funnel damage where you want it to go means a lot. So like this was something that we saw with the people playing Blaster decks yesterday. Like, Blaster gets to upgrade up. Because, right? Because, and then when he goes into combat, when you commit Blaster, he has an armor and he has a utility, and he probably has a Battle Master that's been KO'd and flipped on as his weapon. And so he can shell out damage, and you can craft what happens there. So I was super gratified that people saw that.
Are there any cards currently on your guys' radar that are overperforming or having any negative impact on competitive play that you're closely watching?
I think now that we've dealt with the extra turns situation, we are in a much better place. I would say what we look at is the ubiquitousness of a card in terms of, does every deck that can play the card want to play the card? And my mind is blanking. +2 to Autobot character, -2 to...
press the advantage.
Press the advantage. Like, it's not in bannable territory, but it's something. It's a kind of card that has too ubiquitous use, and there's no good equivalent to it on the other side.
It just makes those wide Decepticon decks like, am I gonna get far?
That's correct. So we're watching that more of how we iterate and design. But I would say that that's not really something that we're not looking to ban that card, but we are looking to take lessons about how we design that card, because we want it to be an obvious choice for Autobots, but now it's a pretty much everywhere if you're on an Autobot team.
Ranged and melee are pretty self-explanatory. In terms of fluff, how would you define a specialist?
A specialist wants to care about comboing a bunch of cards together, right? Range and melee care about doing damage in different ways. A specialist cares about doing things with cards. Yes.
I believe you addressed this before, maybe in an article or not, so go over it again. Artist credits for the cards.
Yep.
Is there any way to possibly get them on the card themselves or somewhere on the web page, website?
So in the credits document.
Yeah.
So when you go to when you go to each product on like TransformersTCG.com products, and then each product has its own page. At the bottom, there's a credits document.
Will it say like each specific person for each specific character?
No, but it does list all the artists who worked on that.
Is there any way to pinpoint who has who?
No, that's not the way Transformers credits artists. And even though Wizards credits artists directly on cards, Transformers as a brand has a different style, and we conform to that style.
It'd be nice to find the artists themselves and say, like, if I meet them in the halls here, it's like, oh, can you sign my Starscream or my...
We are looking at a way to get that information more clearly into players' hands. Certainly, artists are absolutely free to talk about and frequently do the cards that they do.
I would love for them to come forward. Guys, please tell us. And they're allowed to say that. That's not like...
No, they can talk about the cards that they've done. They can't talk about cards that they haven't published yet.
Don't do it.
But folks like Dan Kahana and Marcelo Materi, and there's a whole bunch of folks at Keyword Studios who work on Transformers cards. Sarah Pettery is the art director up there, and you know her as an extremely well-known Transformers artist. She's done a lot of work on comics and for Hasbro. They're actively talking about on their Twitter accounts and social media and their online portfolios how they've done these cards, or what cards they've done.
Ken's original version of Alita 1. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, the one that the extra turn one?
Yes.
No.
Okay, next question.
Sorry.
How about some playtesting stories?
Oh, playtesting stories.
No?
So I am not the world's best gamer. Right?
Okay.
That is not my skill set is not that area. So I have a whole list of boneheaded stories of me making terrible errors in playing. And if you ever play with me when we're at a convention, you will see this clearly. I am not a pro level gamer. So I constantly in playtest was forgetting the bonuses on. I was constantly forgetting the bonuses on the Matrix of Leadership, and that has cost me to lose more than one game. And it's hilarious because Matt Smith. I asked Matt, "Hey, can you put together a quick deck for me?" And he put together an Ultra Magnus deck, which I really enjoy playing. And it's a Magnus Jetfire deck, and it plays around with moving around and making sure that there is an Ultra Magnus armor, but it has Matrix of Leaderships in it. And so that was like, I am going to remember. I'm going to remember that this does things other than give +1 attack. The next time you talk to one of the game designers, they will have lots of awesome stories for you for playtests from the pit.
Were there any 2v2 or co-op type formats in the works, or not something you could discuss?
It's certainly something we discuss pretty regularly and significantly in terms of listening to the community and what kind of demands for a multiplayer format there is. And we definitely see some players, but not an overwhelming number of players, asking about multiplayer play. So for now, we are going to focus on constructed, turbo, and sealed, with a also paying attention to draft at one level down. And when we were very early in the stages of launching this game, and we're still only 1 year in, too much format diversity is actually a negative because it fractures the player base. And right, some players will play multiple formats and clearly do, but there are also some players who may gravitate only towards one preferred format. And while we are continuously building up the critical mass of gamers, we want to make sure that there's a common format language that everybody can understand and talk about, as opposed to Magic, which has many years under its belt and has such a gigantic player base, like orders of magnitude larger than other games, and they can enjoy a multi-format world.
As a content creator, is there anything we should improve on, or something you guys like to see from us or not see from us?
So you guys are fantastic. The content creation community for Transformers is notable in how you dive deep into topics, the topics you cover, the way you are inviting to other players, your viewers. We're very happy with it. So what would I love to see? I'd love to see you guys do deck profiles. I'd love to continue to see deck profiles that go really deep. I'd love to see a little bit more discussion about sideboards and sideboard strategy, because for a lot of players who are coming into competitive play, that is the most difficult.
It's tough to try to pair against multiple different decks in the field. You gotta.
Right. So, for example, talking about a deck that you're advocating as competitive, and then I'd love to see as a regular part of that from the content creation community. It's like, okay, and here's some sideboard strategies. If you are going to be, if you're facing in against, a 2-tall deck, here are some cards to consider for your sideboard. If you're concerned about, Autobot cars, here are some cards to put into your sideboard. And then the other thing that I would love to see a really in-depth look at, and I think this is just because it's very new, is some real in-depth discussion about when to play secret actions.
When to play.
Right,
when to play.
Right. What are the situations where I have deploy in my hands and I have a force field? What are the board states that I am looking at where I'm saying, okay, this is the time when I play my secret action?
Hiding spot's generally an easy one.
Right, there's some that are easy, right? But some of them, you
gotta be
dampening field and bolster, there are situations where they are blowout moves,
oh my God.
and then there are situations where they do nothing for you, right? Or they do minimal work, and helping the community learn what to recognize on the board state would be awesome for everybody.
Okay. That's all I have. I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to thank you guys because throughout the course of the weekend, I've been watching all the developers talk to people, interact with people, sit down and play random pickup games. I think that's fantastic.
That's why we're here.
Absolutely. I love that you guys do that. I've seen other companies not do that, and that's just a detriment on that community.
You know, Wizards in general has an iterative improvement philosophy, and Transformers really takes that to heart, and we try to do iterative improvement very fast. And the only way that can happen is with face-to-face contact. Like, listening to people online is fantastic because you get volume of information. Listening to people talk to you in person gives you quality information. And we want to increase the volume. I don't mean volume by like loudness. I mean like the amount that we hear. Yeah. And so that's why you saw Ken and John at Origins and Scott and Matt.
You guys are mixing and matching.
Right. Well, we're making we want to make sure that the team rotates through so everybody can have that face-to-face experience with players and content creators. And so I thank you for recognizing that because that is critical to how we improve this game.
God, yeah. Can you tell us who's going to be at PAX Unplugged with you? Sure, to tell.
Matt Tabak and I will be at PAX Unplugged for sure, and then we'll see who else.
Yeah, he was a surprise, wasn't he? Scott said he was coming, but he never announced he was coming. So I was like, hey, okay, we'll take that.
Surprise, Matt.
Right, yeah. I thank you for your time, Drew.
Absolutely, Joe. Really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.